point is they do establish reasons for her daughter to betray.
I sympathize with Bavmorda. Her daughter was incompetent.
Of course you would.
Her daughter was incompetent, Doa. She was. Now, Doa, we've seen a lot of time traveling here on Nerd Legion, especially in Star Trek. They just can't help themselves. Time traveling every week. Pretty ridiculous. We're not going to talk about Star Trek today, though, even though I did like the most recent episodes. So we'll get to that.
Oh, wait a second. Okay, hold on. So the most recent episodes, the most recent one was a musical one.
Yep.
So are you saying that you liked the musical one?
I did, and I hate musicals.
Okay, all right. Because I went into it being very, all right, we're doing the wrong episode right now. But I will just say real quick, I went into it expecting the worst, and I did not witness the worst.
I know. It was surprising. As somebody who hates musicals, look, obviously it wasn't my favorite episode ever, but I did think that they pulled it off in a good way. I didn't think they pulled it off in a good way.
I actually 100% agree. Wow. Well, I'm looking forward to next week's episode where I think we're going to jump back with Star Trek. We're kind of doing things in reverse order today now, but like, yeah, we'll do that. There you go. Spoiler alert. We'll jump into Star Trek again next week, I guess.
Yeah. And this week, speaking of time travel, why I bring it up is this is the first time we're not doing something that is topical on this show. New content coming out. We got fed up with a bunch of the garbage, which is kind of sad because this is the week where I think there were actually multiple good Star Trek episodes to discuss. And we'll do it next week instead. However, this week, Doa, you chose Willow from 1988, the Ron Howard directed, George Lucas conceived, Industrial Light and Magic affected, very famous movie that was then turned into what everybody says was an absolutely terrible TV show that has already been yoinked from Disney Plus for tax break reasons.
Yeah. Don't forget Joe Johnston, I believe, executive produced for The Willow as well. And he went on to do like Rocketeer, Captain America, all sorts of good stuff. But
James Horner did the score.
James Horner, rest in peace, James Horner. What a fantastic composer. But did one of Monty's favorite movies, Avatar, as well. So that was a big deal. And my personal favorite, scored the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric soundtrack. He was great. But yeah, Willow is it's not topical, but at the same time, it is kind of topical because of what you mentioned. We did have that Disney Plus recently. In late fall 2022, I think like around October, November, it hit Disney Plus. And then by May of this year, 2023, it was already removed from Disney Plus. And so that is topical in that it does bring up the whole conversation we can talk about of remakes and reboots and sequels 35 years after the original movie was made. And everything that surrounds that. But Willow itself, the movie, the 1988 film, is one of my favorite movies. I wore out the VHS tape with this when I was a kid, and I've been a huge fan my whole life, right? And it's a movie that I've continued to enjoy just as much as I've gotten older, and I've become more aware over time that it's not the perfect movie, not by a long stretch, but it is still one of the most entertaining movies I've ever seen. And I love it to death. So I thought it'd be a fun one to talk about because it does kind of tie in to what's going on in modern streaming, but it's just a fun movie to talk about.
I will say I hadn't seen, as I mentioned last week, I hadn't seen this movie probably in, 15 or 20 years. It had been a long time. And my impression, Stoa, was that this movie aged very badly.
Oh, I don't know. In certain aspects, yes. In most aspects, I would say no. But please continue.
Well, you see, the problem is that it really doesn't have a plot. It's extremely badly written. It's extremely badly written in terms of dialogue. And at the time, what? I could under. Oh my gosh. Do you want to breed?
Wanna breed? Tempting, but no.
All right, that line is the one line in the movie where I'm like, what the hell? Where did this come from? Because that every time that scene comes on, I dread that line because it just harms me deep inside. Yes, like that.
All it's all badly written, Noah. It's all badly written.
It is not all badly written.
We'll get to why it's badly written. It doesn't really have a plot. There really isn't a plot. So what it is it's kind of a vehicle to go from one special effects sequence to the next. And why I say it's aged badly is because obviously, a lot of these effects, which I agree are just incredibly impressive for the time period. Like it is amazing. And like as a visual experience, it's really cool, honestly. I think the aesthetic design is fabulous. I think that the way they did the landscapes and the background paintings is really striking. So the movie looks beautiful. The compositing they did with the brownies and trying to make people bigger or smaller is very, very impressive for the time period. So yeah, and the stop motion animation of the dragon or the, I don't know, whatever, cauldron with legs attacking people at the end, even the way that they did the magical effects, because all of that had to be hand painted. When you, back in the day, when you have the glowing effects on the wands or the lightning, you had to take the film and then paint every single frame in order to get those magic effects. So from a pure like technical piece of visual effects artistry, I think it's quite cool. And even though obviously we can do some of these things better with CG today, there is a real charm to how this movie is done with the technology that they had at the time, and you could see it was really pushing the envelope, and honestly has a shocking amount of effects shots for a period for a film from that period. Like almost every shot, it is crazy how much money they must have spent developing these aspects of it. But unfortunately, that's kind of all it is to me. And if I have to compare it to other movies, even in that period, I would argue that The Princess Bride, which was released a year earlier, has aged much better because the writing is so good in The Princess Bride. And the dialogue is so good and the storyline is so compelling that I would much rather watch that film again than this one.
I think that's a fair point. I would agree that The Princess Bride is a better written film than Willow, but I would also argue that Willow wasn't looking to be, a movie on the level, I think, as an art piece of The Princess Bride. That Willow was made to purely be, I think, a fun, lighthearted adventure film that was a special effects showcase and kind of the big thing that Lucasfilm did after the Star Wars trilogy. You had some Indiana Jones stuff come out, I think, between Jedi and Willow, but this was kind of the first big, like, sort of fantasy thing, that they had done. And yeah, it was special effects wise amazing for the time. And even now, like, obviously there's some stuff that looks a little bit hokey. You can see kind of the edges of some of the green screening and stuff, but it's 1988. You gotta give it some leeway there. So that doesn't bother me.
Objectively, the green screening on our show is now better than the green screening of Willow.
Yeah, that's right. Although my camera, which people have noted is blurry, and it's because right now we're recording this through Discord, and we will upgrade eventually. I assure you, I have a very nice camera. I have a Sony DSLR pointed at me. I am crisp and beautiful in HD on my end, but sadly Discord servers do not treat me well in the sending. But anyway, I so going back to the movie though, man, like you said a lot there. There's a lot to unpack in what you were saying, and while I will say a lot of your criticisms are valid, to me none of that matters because it's just a fun movie to watch. Like I think intent is a big thing here too. Intent is a big part of, like, I think enjoying a film is you have to kind of understand where they're going for, right? They're not going for an Oscar with this. They're going for, at least unless you're talking visual effects maybe, but they're not going for Oscar in storytelling and dialogue. They're just trying to do something fun. Like this movie was made for a younger audience. I feel like it was made for kids that were my age when I watched it for the first time, which was around, it was already on VHS when I watched it for the first time. So this would have been like 1990 or something. I would have been like 6 or 7 years old, And I feel like it's for that age of kid, like elementary school to middle school. Obviously, there's some themes and some lines in there that are targeted
Do
at a
you
much
want to
older
breed?
audience. Wanna breed? Oh, Lug, why did you have to say wanna breed? But but at the same time, it's mostly a kids' film. Mostly. I mean, there were some very brutal stabbings towards the end of it, but that was in kids' films.
I
back
mean,
then.
Lug
People
just
didn't
straight
shy
up
away from that stuff.
Lug just straight up sexually assaults Val Kilmer, thinking that
He does.
he's a woman, and then says, "Want to breed?" I don't know, man.
Yeah, I mean, kids' films were different back then. I'm just gonna put that out there. I'm not talking about the right or wrongness of any of it. I'm just saying this is the way that movies were made in this era. All right, and we all grew up just fine. But I actually really love a lot of the dialogue in this movie. Not that line, but the whole conversation they have about Blackroot is very funny. When Val Kilmer is feeding the baby Blackroot, and Willow's like, as the father of 2 children, you never give a baby Blackroot. And Val Kilmer's like, well, my mom raised this on it. It'll put hair on your chest. And, which is like, he's trying to say, it makes you tough and all that. But Will's response is the last thing the future, queen, whatever is going to want is a hairy chest. And like, so there's funny stuff in there. There's funny dialogue. The whole thing with Sorsha where like I hate the Dust of Broken Hearts stuff, but it does result in a funny line where like, she kicks him in the face at one point. It's kind of a throwaway thing because, villains kick heroes in the face all the time in movies. But later on when they're talking about him falling in love with her, his line is like, I love you, Sorsha. I don't love her. She kicked me in the face, which is just a funny line.
I love you, Sorsha. I don't love her. She kicked me in the face. I hate her. Don't I?
So I think there is a lot of good dialogue in there.
I think it is at its best when it's doing the comic relief stuff. I agree with that.
Yeah.
And in terms of dialogue, there are some funny moments, and yeah, Val Kilmer really sells that line too.
Totally.
But at the same time, when I talk about the writing, we're basically given like a Star Wars-esque written preamble to the world, which is clearly very George Lucas, even though he didn't technically write the script for this one. That was a guy named Bob Dolman. But he did provide the overall arc of the story. And
he came up with the world, basically.
Right.
Like.
And he did say that, like Star Wars, he was waiting until the effects caught up to their ability to make this movie, which I think is obviously a good call because they did have the effects to pull this off eventually and make it look really cool. So it seemed like the timing was good. And I think with George Lucas, at least, he has been good at creating worlds, and he has been good at making sure his movies have kind of an aesthetic unity and are believable in terms of the effects. And that was one of his greatest strengths, I think, in the 70s and 80s. When it comes to the actual narrative of this film, beyond the kind of silly comic relief dialogue, the actual plot is just terrible. And we get the preamble where it just says the Queen Bavmorda is evil and looking for this baby that is... We don't even know what the prophecy is, by the way.
What more do you need? The prophecy is just this baby is going to cause the downfall of her. It doesn't say how. It just says it's going to happen.
And instead of just killing the baby, she has to banish it to the netherworld for reasons that are not explained at any point in time. And so
there is a reason for that, though. I do know the reason. But it's not explained in the film, and
God
so
damn
that is something, yeah. But the reason, apparently, the world lore reason is because this entity, this person that can defeat her, will just keep being reborn if the person is killed.
Why can't you just explain that in the movie?
I don't know. I don't think they knew that when they were making the movie. Maybe they did, maybe they didn't. But that was the explanation given in the later on in the show, I believe it was, or maybe I read this. I don't know. But anyway,
you set up this extremely blatant plot device. Like, we don't have any sympathy for Bavmorda because we don't really even know her goals. The only goal that we know Bavmorda has
do we need
is kill the baby. And then what else? What else is she trying to do? Why is she evil? What's she doing in this world? Conquering people? It's like vaguely hinted at that she's conquering people. Is that worse?
It's not just hinted at. It's outright stated that she's like sending her army around to like sack castles and all that. So yeah, she's clearly bent on world domination, as most villains are. Yeah.
So she doesn't really have any like identifiable qualities. Her motivations are really lame. The motivations of most of the primary characters are incredibly lame. The character development is really, really lacking. If Val Kilmer wasn't in this movie, I don't know. I think this movie would just be absolutely terrible without Val Kilmer, because he carries this movie so ridiculously hard. If you think about the what happens with Sorsha, who's Bavmorda's daughter, who just turns on her for no reason.
That's not true. That is not true. They set it up from the beginning of the movie. The first thing her mom does in the movie is call her incompetent. And like, so it establishes very on that her mother is being abusive to her and has been for a long time. So there is precedent.
So
Somebody didn't watch the movie very closely.
I mean, I was watching it. That's not usually why children turn on their parents and try and murder them. I don't know, Noah. Like, calling somebody incompetent is not typically a reason. It's not like she's in a position
an evil queen. We can assume there's been more than just verbal abuse.
It's not. But what? It's not like she's not in a position of power. She's not locking her in the dungeon. She's literally giving Sorsha important things to do. She's giving Sorsha the most important thing to do. So what?
She does say she
riddle me
trusts
this.
her.
Riddle me this. What is Bavmorda's number one goal?
It is to ban the baby from life.
Okay, so who does she send to acquire the baby?
She does say that she trusts her daughter more than ever.
Oh my God! Yeah, exactly.
But so why does she treat her like that? You know, she shouldn't. If she trusts her so much, but basically, I think it's because she trusts her, but not out of love. More that she thinks that her daughter is this pawn she can control. Is the impression I always got from that.
She must think that her daughter is competent at some level. And look, put yourself in Doa, I need you to put yourself in Bavmorda's shoes, okay?
Well, no, hold on, because she sends the general guy, General Kale. That's who she sends to go find the baby. She only sends Sorsha out after he has some trouble with it.
Okay, yes.
Because when he shows up, she's like, "Oh, finally someone I can rely on," basically, you know.
Well, that could also just be a reaction to the failure of her daughter. That's not the point. Yeah. She has an empire. She has a kingdom of people she could send to do this. So put yourself in Bavmorda's position. Put yourself in Bavmorda's position. Is it abusive to call Sorsha incompetent when you trusted your daughter, who you clearly believe is somewhat competent, to go acquire a baby? Now, I don't know about you, but if I was Bavmorda and this was very important, and it was literally the task of getting a baby, and the baby was just in your castle, by the way, so not very far away, and you send your daughter after her, and she comes back empty-handed, don't you think that if you are a parent trying to groom your daughter to be the leader of a kingdom, that you might call them incompetent for, I don't know, being incompetent?
I think Bavmorda is supposed to be that type of kind of like immortal evil entity, kind of, where she wasn't really planning on dying and handing over the company at any time, you know. But the point is, they do establish reasons for her daughter to betray.
I sympathize with Bavmorda. Her daughter was incompetent.
Of course you would.
Her daughter was incompetent, Doa. She was.
I think Monty saying "I sympathize with Bavmorda" is one of my favorite quotes all time. It's one of the least surprising things I've ever heard, but at the same time, it's also like shocking in its hilarity. But you know, I think this movie does have a plot. It's a very simple plot. And my point is that this movie is a very simple plot and premise, executed well. I think it doesn't need to be complex. It's not a story that hasn't been told before. I mean, they're even pulling biblical things out of there, right? Where it's like, Bavmorda is basically AKA King Herod trying to find Jesus and kill him, right, in the New Testament. And then you've got a little bit of Old Testament where they Moses the baby down the river on the little thing of reeds. So there's nothing original going on here.
And Doa, not only that, not original stuff, but they also pull directly from the Odyssey when they turn all the soldiers into pigs, which is what happens to Odysseus's men with the sorceress Circe. Circe literally uses a wand in the Odyssey to turn Odysseus's men into pigs, and that's exactly what happens outside Bavmorda's castle. There's also the fact, hey, let me describe a plot to you, Doa, And tell me if you've heard this one before, okay?
Okay. If it's just a hero's journey, though, I'm going to be very disappointed.
No. There's a society of agrarian halflings that live in their own community, far away from most other people. And
would you describe it as a shire?
Would I describe it as a shire? Perhaps. And all of a sudden, there's an intrusive force that causes one of these people to go on a quest to defeat a kind of vague and ultimate evil. Have you heard this one before?
I think I have, but if you replace the ring with a baby, you get a lot more sympathy from the audience. Much cuter, and that is a very cute baby, by the way, in that movie. Like,
it's two babies,
and one of the things it is two babies, which when you're shooting someone that young, you have to because a baby can't be on set for that long, obviously. But having a month and a half year old at home right now for me is like made me like so amazed what they were able to get performance wise out of this baby. The expressions on this kid's face are just so great. Like they must have just put her in different positions and just pointed the camera at her for like hours, because babies make a lot of different faces when they're that age, but like to get the perfect expressions like they did, that is one of the things I've always loved about this movie. I'm like, how in the world did they get the absolute perfect expressions in this baby whenever they need? That was impressive.
It was.
Anyway. But so to go back to the overall thing with the story again, like, it's nothing new. It's a typical hero's journey. Willow sets out. He's got the old man mentor kind of thing in Billy Barty, who's awesome, who kind of introduces him into the strange new world. He denies the quest at first by kind of like trying to pass the baby off to Kilmer, then goes back, gets pulled back into it anyway, goes on to learn. I mean, you can, if you look at the typical hero's journey plot line, it is beat by beat this. So is Star Wars. So is a lot of things.
That's not my problem. But, I mean, this is literally my field of study at university, which is, mythology, hero's journey, oral tradition, storytelling. And George Lucas was a known Joseph Campbell fan and literally used, the hero's journey, Joseph Campbell's book, to provide a framework for Star Wars. And there's no problem with doing that, by the way. It creates good stories. So he is very, very aware of this. And it is, as you say, like basically a perfect representation of that.
Yeah, and I think that's perfectly fine. I think there's nothing wrong with taking a very basic premise and structure and making a very basic story that's just meant to be fun and entertaining. So, again, like, I'm not bothered as much by things just kind of happening. I mean, the movie is very aware that it is what it is. I mean, we have Val Kilmer becoming a human snowball rolling down a mountain at one point. It goes to cartoony lengths at points, so
that's part of the charm of it, though.
Yeah, totally. And I like little like theme setup things that happen early on that pay off later. Like, for instance, like Billy Barty's character, the high alderman or whatever, the kind of like main wizard in the little Noan village and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, he's great. And he says some things that set you up for stuff down the line, where he'll say, like, forget the bird, follow the river, is kind of a comedic moment, right, where he makes a magic bird and it flies the wrong way, supposedly. But it also is kind of communicating to Willow, too, that, like, don't be so obsessed with magic and magical power. Sometimes the answer to your problem is very mundane and, like, right in front of you. And in the end, Willow does save the day with just a simple, like, sleight of hand trick, So there is that. I feel like there is a little bit of setup to kind of, like, tell you what the main themes are going to be through the movie too, right? Where it's like the power to control the world is which finger is it in? And the answer is like, it's in your finger, right?
Exactly.
Which sounds kind of like, oh, come on, please. But at the end of the day, again, with Willow, it's like, it's not my, my ability to gain this magical power that's ending up saving the day and changing the world. It's just me being, me. So there are those kind of themes in there too, which I like.
Sure, I agree with you. I do. I also enjoy those themes. The problem is that when those themes are executed, so Bavmorda reacts to the baby trick disappearing to knocking over the ritual instruments and banishing herself, which is just a stupid. It's a stupid Deus Ex Machina, Noah.
Yeah, it is.
So like,
I won't deny it. It totally is.
Is that what you? Is that how you wanted this movie to end? Right? It's not even impressive. It's just he's like, oh look, I did the pig disappearing trick. And then Bavmorda's like, oh no! And then she knocks over the thing and then banishes herself.
Well, it's because she's unsure of what his power level is, you know, because he's got these like magic acorns and stuff like that. And he clearly knows a little bit of his way around magic, and she's never heard of him. He's got Cylindria's wand as well. So like she's unsure what Willow can do, and which you can tell is kind of one of the reasons he gets away with this, is because like, how strong is this person really, you know?
Again, what you're saying makes sense, but the actual practical application of what we see in the movie. So ignore what you just said, and then think about the fact that she saw a baby disappear and then just fell over and banished herself. She just tripped on some. She got so disturbed by seeing the baby disappear. She just tripped over her own equipment, and that's what killed her. Okay, so can we just agree it could have been done better?
I mean, in the Lord of the Rings, in the books, Gollum like dies by just tripping and falling off of the edge of the volcano. So
let's not hold up Lord of the Rings as great writing, okay?
And ultimately, my answer to all of this is I don't care. It's just a fun movie, but I do agree. Obviously, if we're looking at it from a very critical standpoint, then yes, that is a lame way to end your villain, right?
So
but it's
lame.
You know, the thing is like, this is a theme that pops up in like everything George Lucas is connected to, right? And a lot of stuff in the day, right? You see this in Star Wars, right, where the Emperor is essentially defeated by himself, and that his pupil Vader throws him down the thing. You see this in Indiana Jones stuff all the time. We talked about this, where evil is ultimately self-defeating. So this is a theme that George Lucas and everybody, you know, the people he works with, Spielberg, Ron Howard, and all that, really like to put in their films. And so yeah, it's silly, right, that she like bumps into this and accidentally, oops, the spell's on now, and you get, you know, sucked up into the ceiling to, you know, you're off to hell or whatever. I don't know, but the seventh night or whatever it is. But like, you know, but this is again just a theme they really like in this movie, is that evil is ultimately self-defeating. And so this is a ham-fisted, admittedly, way of including it in this movie, but I think that's where it comes from, you know? Yeah. How about those dog things? Those dog things were
those are really cool. I guess they got real. When I was a kid. I guess they got real dogs and put them in like rat dog costumes and got them to run around. That's really fun. It looked really good. Yeah. It looked really good.
Well, sometimes that's what I love about. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, like, a lot of the time, you know, I've been watching on 4Play, the other show on this channel, a lot of movies from the 80s. And those practical effects are still great, man. It makes me pine for the non-CG days, because you just get very realistic movement out of the rat dogs, and as long as you're not focusing on their faces not moving, as long as you shoot the scene properly, you know what I mean? Which they don't. Like, they don't just like zoom in on the face where it's not moving. They're mostly showing them running around outside and chasing people, and so it's very effective, and it looks incredibly natural because they're real animals in costume running around. A lot of the animal training in this movie overall, Doa, is really, really impressive, because they use a bunch of real animals, you know, for the various effects where the, what's her name? The sorceress, Finn Rizal. Yeah. They use her because she changes into a variety of animals, and they use real animals. And then I found out later on, when I was doing some research on this film, that the last transformation sequence was one of the first CGI effects that happened, where they took the different animals and they used a computer to like change her into all of the, like, the tiger and the ostrich before they changed her back into a real form. And so that was also just incredibly cool, and I think very innovative for the time. But just using the real animals overall in this movie, like being the possum and the crow and the goat, was great. It was really, really good.
I think you got to hand it to, you know, Ron Howard and his directing. He did a great job in this film. Going back to like the you know, dog things, I think a lot of stuff in that era in like the 70s and 80s would like do like a zoom in on the face and be like, oh, look how scary it is. And then you'd be like, well, that's a stupid puppet face, you know? Yeah. But not shooting it the way he did, where it's always fast moving, it's always rushing by. You get the sense of like speed and like strength to these things that's scary, right? And the fact that you never get a clear view really of them, I think, as again with who this movie is marketed to, it makes it scarier, right? Because at that age, and really at any age, if you don't see something clearly, your mind is probably going to come up with something scarier than it actually looks like, right? So the directing is I think great in this movie. Just overall, I like the way they put together shots in what was it? I'm trying to remember how they start. I should have written this down. I'm usually very good about note taking, but I didn't write this one thing down. But the very first shot in the movie, the way they pan the camera and like introduce the characters into frame is very cool. And I think just Ron Howard's a good director. So yeah, that's something I like about it. That's something that sets it apart from other movies of this time too. Where do I want to go to next?
Let's talk about the actors.
Well, real quick before that, one thing that I like is that they keep this movie light for the most part by doing things you wouldn't expect in movies that are like this, where, for instance, where the big dog things come and look for the baby, and they're like, oh, they're looking for a baby, and Willow's like, oh no, my wife is home alone with the baby. In a lot of movies, his wife would be dead, and he would be set off on some, I gotta rescue the baby, but I also have revenge in my heart kind of arc. So many movies, even Star Wars,
I was gonna even George Lucas movies. Yeah, exactly. It's the Tatooine. He comes back home and everybody's dead. It could have been that again.
So, I like that they, and I hate using this term, subvert our expectations in that she's just fine, but Willow is scared enough to realize that something needs to be done, and that propels him forward in the story. But I like that they didn't kill his wife. Like, it's nice when movies just are nice to the main characters, which, if I jump into the TV series for a moment, makes it even worse when then they make your beloved characters shattered husks of who they used to be, which, please stop doing that. It's possible to bring back these characters in their old versions without making them having gone through like horrible trauma and stuff like that. Can't they just be cool old versions of themselves?
I am shocked to hear that, because I haven't seen the TV show Doa, because the charm of this movie is that it's kid friendly, is that everything is okay. There's an optimism to him having the lock of his wife's hair and then coming back home and seeing her and his kids again and everything being okay, that is feel good. And so it really does, I think, destroy the tone of the movie to have it go all gritty and, as you say, have people have all this trauma that this isn't a film about trauma, really, outside of Saoirse, right? Arguably. But that is the worst part of the movie, is because her actions aren't really believable and she's not even really a character in this. And the fact that she switches so hard and like falls in love with Mad Mardigan, who's Val Kilmer's character, for apparently no reason, which we'll get to.
She was really lonely, I guess. I don't know. That part, as I've watched the movie as I've gotten older, that aspect of this story has bothered me more and more, where it's like, this doesn't make any sense. Why, I know she's probably upset at her mom about mistreating her. It seems that way, but like, she could be like, no, Mom, I love Val Kilmer now, and it's not a phase. There's nothing you can do about it. It does seem like kind of a rebellious kind of like, it doesn't make a lot of sense unless you kind of frame it in like her rebelling against her mom. But then it's like, well, then this isn't real romance, but none of it's real romance because it's a stupid dust of broken hearts. And, again, it's all, that aspect of it all is all kind of played off for laughs. But when you kind of digest the situation as an adult, you're like, oh, this kind of makes me feel a bit uncomfortable. but whatever, it's for kids,
It does. I mean, as an adult, when I was yelling at the screen when I was watching this film yesterday was just hate fuck already.
I thought it would be Bavmorda was right, but but I guess he yelled that too. But
just hate fuck already, because Mad Mardigan and Saoirse clearly like have sexual chemistry, and I think, obviously in real life, because Joanne Whalley and Val Kilmer got married and had kids after this movie.
Did they?
Yeah, they're divorced now, but they have 2 kids together. So the sexual chemistry was real, and you can see that. I think that comes across in the film. But even though they're supposed to hate each other, and Saoirse is kicking Madmartigan in the face and locking him in chains, obviously if you're into that kind of thing, there is something kinky about that, right? And so they do have this really nice sexual tension that develops. But I think they would have hate fucked. I don't know if Saoirse,
not in this movie though. This is not the movie for that kind of scene though. No.
What? There's no hate fucking in Willow.
Well, Willow and the baby were like right in the room when they're having like their first kiss and all that. We're taking this movie in a whole different direction if that's what you want. Like, I don't know if that fits.
I'm just saying
well.
that's what should have happened if they were presenting these characters as they did. What ends up happening is Saoirse just falls head over heels, even though what's disturbing about it is Madmartigan says, I was under the magical influence, basically declaring my love for you. And it's not real. And then she falls in love even after he tells her that it wasn't real.
He's just so charismatic.
He's very good looking.
He is. He's Madmartigan's very charismatic, attractive man, and he's breaking into tents and saving babies and sword fighting. Sure, that might be appealing to people. Yeah, there you go. But let's talk about the characters anyway. But I want to go. First, I want to talk about Warwick Davis as well.
He's great
because he absolutely crushes it. And keep in mind, he was like 19 when he did this role. He was.
Oh, really?
He was because he was like 11 or 12 in Return of the Jedi. And so no, it was so. Yeah, math-wise, he was in his like late teens when they filmed this, I believe. So,
actually, he was 18 when this movie was released. He was born in 1970, so he must have been 17 or 16 filming it. That's actually really impressive. He did a great job.
He crushed it. Like the acting is from him, I think, is very good in this movie. Like you really feel, like his relationship with his wife and kids and all that. You sense the love coming through for the kids. You sense how like. He doesn't want to leave this world behind, but like, he wants to take care of this baby. He's just a good person, And so Willow's character feels very believable throughout, where, he has this very good heart, but at the same time, he's very hesitant and reluctant to go out into the big world. I mean, he does try to pass the baby off to Madmartigan at the first opportunity and go home and be like, well, there's my quest. I'm done, which is a bad thing for his character to do. But of course, he's pulled back into it again. But I think very, very well acted throughout by Warwick Davis, who's obviously went on to do a lot of really great things. So, yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was really good. It's even more impressive in that context because playing a character who's married and has kids when you're that young is really difficult. And I would have never, ever, ever guessed that he was a teenager. So that's very impressive. And I think, obviously Val Kilmer is great. And Val Kilmer he is just an amazing actor, and he's been in movies. He's just hard carried movies that have aged badly, I will say. I was watching like a couple years ago. I rewatched Top Gun aged pretty well. But you know what movie didn't?
Anyway,
you know what didn't age very well is Tombstone. Okay, Tombstone.
Oh, I haven't watched that in a long time.
You watch it again. I watched it a couple years ago. You would be very surprised at how bad it is. But he, as Doc Holliday, is exceptional in Tombstone. And so his performances have really, really stood the test of time. And if you think about the absolute shit dialogue that Val Kilmer was given to say in this movie, especially the scene in the tent where he's basically doing some really terrible Shakespeare clone lines about.
It's supposed to be cheesy, though.
I know, but it's hard to do that well.
I agree. Yeah, I was thinking that when I was watching it this morning. Actually, was that like he's making this work? And I thought the other thing that stood out is when he's in the cage and he's trying to convince them to let him out and all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking like a lot of other actors of this era would have delivered those lines totally differently, and it would have been all wrong. But he did it, and I have this in my notes. Like, he just did everything so sincerely, and he had such total commitment, it seemed like, to the character that you believe it, and it works, and it's great.
Nobody's gonna take care of that baby. You know why? Nobody cares. Except me. You want to go back to your families. I want out of this cage. Let me take care of that baby. I'll look after her like she was my own.
He's great. I mean, I think Val Kilmer is extremely underrated as an actor. He is just amazing, I think. And the fact that
really,
he was given in a lot of these films just very little good material, and he turns out he just does it amazingly. And then you also get to see him in movies like Heat, where he's given an extremely good script, and then he's just phenomenal, right?
or Batman Forever. Yeah.
Which came out the same year as Heat, weirdly.
Did it really?
Yeah.
Hey, well, you win some, you lose some, but it was still fun. Yeah, but he didn't appear in the Willow TV series because obviously, very sadly, he's been battling throat cancer for a long time, and he's lost the ability to speak essentially.
Right.
And so, for instance, for Top Gun Maverick, they had to digitally recreate his voice and then overlay that over the scenes that he was in. But apparently, it's very difficult for him to, be part of that kind of stuff now, which is very sad because that aside, he would have had, I think, a much longer, much more, storied career. He had a lot more to give, I think. But, so that is a sad aspect to it too. Is that, like, I agree. He was one of my favorite actors in a lot of stuff growing up, including Batman Forever. And so to not get to see him, do more things at a more advanced stage is a bummer.
And that's the crossover we needed on this show, Noah, because Batman Forever was, of course, written by Akiva Goldman, who's the showrunner on Strange New Worlds.
There you go. Yeah, we bring it all back around. Yeah. Was it But he was just Batman and Robin, though, not Batman Forever.
He was both. He was both.
It was both. Oh, okay. I should have known. He did a much better job with Batman and Robin. But suddenly I feel the feeling millions of nerds.
Jim Carrey was low-key a great Riddler, though.
Oh, yeah. I mean, talk about total commitment to your role. But, yeah, it's great. Yeah. Uma Thurman is Poison Ivy. I don't know. But,
that didn't go great.
But Arnold Schwarzenegger is Mr. Freeze. Yeah,
that was awesome. I agree.
Take 2 of these and call me in the morning. What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age.
Your Arnold Schwarzenegger's impression's pretty good, though. I gotta hand it to you.
Thank you. Whenever he talks in that movie, I listen and I love it.
Back to Willow. Val Kilmer's great. Yeah. He's given a lot of really terrible lines. He executes them really well, and I agree. It's his sincerity in the delivery that he really invests himself in this character, in this world, and is super fun to watch. Obviously, the stunts and stuff he was doing with the swordplay were really well done by him as well.
Yeah.
He's really good, and I think that's why Joanne Whalley really falls flat. I don't necessarily blame her for being a bad actress because her character arc is so ridiculous, going from basically just falling in love with Val Kilmer for no reason that it's hard to
not being given a lot to work
exactly. With. I think it's really hard to act that well because she just turns on a dime in the middle of a battle from trying to kill him to trying to save him. So I don't know what you do with that. There aren't even lines, and you have to 180 your character. It's just bad writing. So I think she was a victim of the bad writing. The rest of the actors were good. Patricia Hayes as Finn Rizal was, I think, great as the shape-shifted sorceress who then has the battle with Bavmorda at the end. A lot of people in the Nelwyn Village were really good. I think Billy Barty, like you said, was excellent as the wizard.
I believe this was one of the first movies that really used little people actors in a way that didn't just put them in a bunch of costumes and have them be kind of bit characters. It really let them act,
Yeah.
And it seemed like that was something that was significant about the movie too, is that that group of people really got to stand out in a way that they sadly aren't able to in a lot of other films, and paved the way for more opportunities for that type of thing down the road, hopefully. But I thought Jean Marsh was Queen Bavmorda, right? She's kind of the cackling evil, villain. But I one thing I like about this movie is I feel like pretty much everybody is having a lot of fun in their role, which I feel like is something you can always tell or not tell in a movie, And I think she's having, I wasn't there, but I feel like she had a lot of fun in that role, and it has to be fun as an actor to get to be just sort of like the gleeful cackling evil character, right? It's got to be great, and she's very convincing in that role as well. I always thought General Kale was Pat Roach as General Kale was a pretty threatening villain. I don't know, that mask was scary. Did you know too that he's the big dude that Indiana Jones fights in Raiders of the Lost Ark that then gets backed into a plane propeller.
Yes. Yeah,
Same
I
guy.
did know that. Yeah, I did know that. And I also thought that the Brownies were really good, like physical comedy, comic relief. So Kevin Pollak and Rick Overton, I think they did a very good job. Now, why the Brownies had some sort of weird hybrid French/Spanish accent going on was very strange.
Yeah, I'm like, why are they so French? I don't know. It's like,
it alternates. Like sometimes it's kind of like French, sometimes like Spain, Spanish. I was like, what's going on with these guys' accents?
It's mostly very like comically French, not accurately French, like comically French. And I just have to. I was wondering about that too. I'm like, did the writers or did Ron Howard just be like, hey, you know who sounds funny? The French. So like, please just try to be a crazy cartoon version of, and like,
was he wrong?
I don't know.
It was funny.
I mean, yeah, it was kind of funny, but like, it did seem very strange. I'm trying to think of we talked about Billy Barty already, who is great. I feel like we've pretty much covered everyone who's, I feel like, stand out and kind of significant, on the acting side. You're watching this and you were one of the other actors. If you're Phil Von De Caro, who played Von Car out there, sorry about that. You were a very powerful looking Noan warrior, but you didn't do a ton in the movie. You weren't a main character. Sorry.
Yeah.
Let's talk about. Go ahead.
You can also just see how this film influenced even other fantasy movies, because obviously the film locations in England and Wales and especially New Zealand, the mountain scenes, I mean, you could really see how this influenced Peter Jackson and Lord of the Rings. Like a lot of those really big sweeping shots of the New Zealand mountains, the matte painting, because remember they would superimpose a lot of the foreground onto backgrounds of matte paintings to make this fantastical universe. Really good landscape design from that perspective, and just the visual design overall, the costumes, everything like that was, I thought, super immersive in this world. And it really did feel like a good aesthetic unity. Even just the way the world looks, like it feels lived in, which is a specialty of, I would say, a lot of these George Lucas movies. Like the original Star Wars movies feel very lived in. They feel like real places. And there's so much different texture and color, and the costumes look like they were authentically handmade, and the attention to detail is really, really good, and that just increases your investment and immersiveness within this world.
Yeah, there's a unity to it, and that's another thing that not just me but a lot of people criticized about the Willow show, going back to that too, is that you had lots of weird costuming and things that were not really explained very well. Like at one point, Laura Denon just finds these two lumberjack women in the forest in a cabin, and they're kind of just dressed like regular, country folk, and but they speak with like overly flowery, overly emphasized British dialects, and it's just that show just did a lot of random things that didn't make sense.
So if any wicked men think they're going to come here and disturb our repast, they're not going to be so wicked when me and Anna finish with them. Oh, if you get my meaning.
And they were just trying to, somebody told them that the original Willow had quirky dialogue and things, and they're like, all right, well, we'll just do that too. It's like, the show is another example of having the ingredients but not knowing the recipe. They had a list of things people liked about the movie but had no idea how to put that together in a show. But going back to what you were saying, visually, it's a great film.
Yeah,
the movie is awesome.
But as good as the visual aesthetics are, and as good as James Horner's score is, I do have to be critical of one aspect of this movie, Doa, which is the sound design. I want you to go back, and our editor will put this in here. Watch the scene where the last fight scene where we saw Finn Rizal and Bavmorda fighting. Remember, these are two old women fighting. And what I want you to do is I want you to carefully listen to the sound effects when Finn Rizal is punching Bavmorda.
It's a good old Hollywood meat slammers. You just take a couple steaks. They taught us this on Mystery Science 3000. Oh, I'm wearing that shirt. But you just take a couple. Like steaks and put them on like ping pong paddles and just smack them together. There you go. That's how you make the sound.
It sounds like Batman is punching someone when this grandma.
there's a lot of that. There's a lot. There's one point where like Val Kilmer, when he's like getting the cage down that Finn Rizal's trapped in as a possum, and it like something snaps and he hits himself in the head somehow. It's like a cartoony metal like boink kind of sound, and like so there are, and I know, again, you know, the movie is targeted towards a younger audience, but I do agree they went a little bit too cartoony with some of the sound effects there.
I mean, the grandma punching scene is really just egregiously hilarious.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's supposed to be hilarious though, right? Where it's like they're these wizards, but they just end up kind of punching each other. But I think that also fits the wizarding world of Willow, where you know your reliance on magic only goes as far as if it's practicality, you know. If it's better for a wizard to punch another wizard in the face, if that's the right thing to do at the moment, you're not going to try to say a spell. You're just going to punch him in the face.
It's not about that. It's about the sound effect that is used. I agree with you in principle. It's just like hilariously done. You know, the other thing that really...
I'm on board with your critique of the soundtrack, though. Or it's not the soundtrack, the sound effect. Yeah.
I also think if you listen to this, I heard at least 3 Wilhelm screams in this movie. At least 3.
Yeah, they did a couple of those. Yeah.
There was one at the beginning during the wagon chase scene when the guy falls off the wagon. There's a Wilhelm scream there, and then there's actually 2 like back to back in the final castle sequence that are separated by maybe a minute. So it's just really, really, really blatantly obvious. And I'm down for the in joke of Wilhelm screams. Like, it's in the Star Wars movies and it's in hundreds of films, obviously. But to do it 3 times in one movie, and especially to do 2 right in a row, I found very distracting and rather stupid.
Yeah, my rule for Wilhelms is that you get 1. You get 1 per movie. More than 1 is always too much because it stands out too much. Like, everybody knows it. Like you said, it is that inside joke. So you get 1. 1 is okay. 1 is like, oh, haha, there's a Wilhelm scream. 2 is like, oh, come on. We already did. Yeah.
And then 2 back to back after doing 1 earlier in the movie is not, it's not cool. It's not cool, Ron Howard.
Can we just talk about, I want to go backtrack a little bit, and can we just talk about how horrible the people of the first town they visit are? Like, everyone in that town is just a terrible person, apparently. That's where Lug lives.
Mm-hmm.
And so they go in this bar, and everyone's like threatening to like eat Willow, and everyone's just a jerk, despite the fact that he's got this hungry baby there. And then you get into the thing with Lug, where like the hypocrisy of like Lug, you know, assaulting Val Kilmer as a woman, and his wife supposedly has to be okay with that, but then he's upset when she's dallying with another man, right? Come on, Lug, you hypocrite. And like, it's so everyone in that town is just so horrible. Did they just somehow stumble into like a small segment of the world's worst human beings? Like, that scene kind of made me wonder, is this a world worth saving?
Exactly. Maybe Bavmorda was right to conquer these people, though. Because here's the thing.
I don't know.
We don't know what Bavmorda does when she conquers people. We know that she's conquering people. She's allegedly evil, but is it evil to want to stay alive when a baby's trying to kill you? I don't know, Doa. If a baby was trying to kill me, I would kill the baby. I'm just going to put that out there.
It was coming at you with an AK-47.
If a baby was coming at me, and the prophecy says the baby's coming at her. Now, yes, is she in a war of conquest? But she's conquering these people, and these people are savages.
Yeah.
And they're just bad people.
That town was rough, no doubt. But maybe I can't.
Maybe she's on a war of conquest against a more evil empire, and she's trying to uplift the population. Because her character is so badly defined, Doa, we just have no idea what kind of person she is.
I feel like you're kind of telling me the same things that like Anakin Skywalker started saying, where it's like in my empire we would have security and safety and control. Like, I think you just want to be, in your ideal world scenario, an authoritarian dictator. You really believe you would do everything right. I think maybe. I've always
but I'm just saying that because we don't know anything about Bavmorda's actual goals or the way that she governs, because the movie is written so badly, there's no nuance to her character. And as you say, when we see this town, all it did was make me ask, is Bavmorda bad?
Yeah, that is one of the questions that you don't have as a kid that now I do have as an adult watching this movie. And I've watched this movie many times as an adult too. But yeah, they're
also no wonder why the Nelwyn want nothing to do with people, by the way.
Oh yeah, totally.
These people suck.
I wouldn't either. Those people did suck. Do all people suck? It's hard to say. We didn't really get a good view of what other towns and cities are like in this world, which is something that I feel like the movie is kind of missing, you know? Is that like you would assume the rest of the world is filled with good, noble people, but unfortunately the only people we're shown are kind of scumbags. So yeah, it does make you a little bit concerned about the world at large. But I'm not ready. I'm not on Team Bavmorda yet. but that is one instance that made me kind of lean towards Team Bavmorda a little bit. But I still think she's the villain for the most part. Yeah. How about I will say I think this is one of the last great generic fantasy movies, because although the world does look lived in, it is a very good looking world, it is a very generic fantasy world where everything is very like vaguely European with like a little bit of like Asian elements here and there. They've got like throwing stars and stuff like that, but you know, which hilarious. Why not? You know, throwing stars are fun. Who wouldn't love to
ninjas
have
were big in the
stars
80s.
Yeah, they were rather popular, but you know, so but if you look at this, it is very generically fantasy, and where in the sense of you have the bad guys wear like black leather and they have fur trim and all this kind of stuff, and they're like, you know, riding black horses, and you've got like skull mask and all this kind of thing. It's very I like that. I like the sort of like simplicity of generic fantasy. You can obviously do fantasy much better, and the genre has evolved so much since then, but it is kind of fun to see one of the last great generic fantasy films, you know?
Yeah,
it's fun to visit.
I watched Krull recently.
Oh,
as
yeah,
well.
there you go.
I mean, there's a lot of these. What was the Tom Cruise one?
Didn't we watch Krull together? Wasn't that last year?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yeah. When you were at my house.
Yeah, when it was you and me
Right.
and Wolf staying there for a month doing the League Worlds
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah. That was fun.
Yep. Was fun.
What is the Legend, the 85 Tom Cruise unicorn movie?
Not the Will Smith 2000 zombie movie.
Sorry, not that one.
Not I Am Legend. Yeah.
There's a lot of this going around, and maybe we should do some more of these, because I think this is a really entertaining time period, like these 80s, you know, fantasy movies, and it was really big. It was really big at the time, right? It was really big, and Legend is directed by Ridley Scott, by the way. So we had Ridley Scott and Ron Howard doing these fantasy epics in the 80s, which is pretty fun.
Doesn't Tim Curry play Satan in that movie?
Yes. Yeah,
I think he does. Yeah.
Well, it's like the Lord of Darkness or something, but yes, he does.
I haven't seen that in a very long time. But
and there was also Labyrinth as well with David Bowie and really young Jennifer Connelly,
which has some of the worst songs ever in a movie. I don't care what you say.
And that was directed by Jim Henson. So.
Yeah, but he didn't write the songs. I don't think he just did the puppet stuff. And the puppets are amazing. But yeah. Don't get me started on the Baby Said song in that movie. Ugh. But well, we should do the animated Transformers movie from the 80s too then. At some point.
Has nothing to do with what we're talking about, but
I just want to do it. I just want to do it. Just one last thing I want to touch on is that a lot of the action scenes early on I think are pretty good. Like the wagon chase scene. I like, because it's got lots of little neat action, you know.
Oh, it's really good
in the set piece. You know, Willow climbing out to grab the reins. You've got people hanging off the back. It's, you know, it's all very like, you know, again, like very classic, generic, fun, you know, fantasy adventure stuff. I that's what I like this movie for. At the end of the day, I like it for its genericness and its approachability, and it's just simple fun, you know. And I liked it as a kid because it entertained me, and as an adult, I appreciate it for what it's doing, despite the fact that it is definitely not Oscar material. I think it's just a fun film.
I think it's fun, and it was definitely worth rewatching, and especially thinking about it in the context of how groundbreaking it was, especially in terms of visual design and visual effects. It's a really impressive piece. As a narrative and as a piece of writing, I would say it's pretty bad. But that is part of its charm, in a way. And as I said at the start, I do think that there are other films of this period, most notably The Princess Bride, that have held up really a lot better over the years. The Princess Bride is just so well written, and it's like so iconic in terms of some of its dialogue. The problem with Willow is that all of its dialogue is just incredibly forgettable. The one we could
What?
want
No,
to
it's
breed.
not. That's not forgettable, but for the wrong reasons. But
Exactly.
like, I mean, again, I think there's some lines in that are very memorable. The Blackroot stuff, the "I don't love her, she kicked me in the face" line. Like I think there's plenty.
I think it really just pales in comparison to how memorable, the Princess Bride is, and like Wallace Shawn's like inconceivable, and
Sure, but you're comparing like a straight A student to like a B minus student. You know, they're both going to get through the grade. They're both going to advance, but one's clearly smarter than the other. You know, but at the end of the day, they both pass.
I just think The Princess Bride is great. That's all. And
agree.
it was hard for me to watch this movie without thinking about The Princess Bride and then wanting to rewatch The Princess Bride. That was kind of what I was left with here. But I did enjoy it, and like I said, I thought especially the visuals are really, really, really well done. And I can see why this was such an exciting movie when it was released, because it would have been novel and groundbreaking and spectacular in so many ways. It's just that the story takes a back seat to that. And as technology has gotten better over time, I think a lot of the original reasons why this film was so exciting have been lost. And then it kind of has been left to stand on the writing, and that's not good. So it's a relic that I enjoy, but
yeah,
I don't think it's aged particularly well.
It's not a movie that I feel like younger people today, like kids in middle school or whatever, I don't think they would appreciate it obviously the same way that we did, right? Because it doesn't look as good as a lot of the stuff that's out now. And if they are discerning viewers and care a lot about the writing, which it's hit and miss at that age, they would have issues with it there too. So it is. I was surprised when they decided to make a TV show off of this, because I think it was fun, and I think there's some things you can explore yet in the universe, but it was one of those things where it was kind of nice that it was just sort of a standalone thing, and I will admit I was excited when they announced the TV show. All right, well, if we're doing this, great. They're bringing Warwick Davis back, obviously. I think there's a lot more you could explore in the universe. So it isn't an intellectual property that's been done to death like Star Wars and Star Trek now and all that. So I was kind of curious. I was optimistic about it. The first trailer I thought looked really good. The first trailer seemed like it really captured what made the original movie good, which is sort of like being more lighthearted, being more focused on adventure and like fun and stuff. And then the show came out, and it was terrible. It was very anachronistic in that they would insert rock music into random places, and the other parts of the score that were trying to be fantasy kind of music were just really, really bad and generic. I would say that show is some of the worst music of any show I've ever seen in my life.
It's disappointing too, because on the one hand, there wasn't a lot to go on in terms of plot, right? Again, because this was basically a special effects vehicle, but that can also be a blessing because it opens up the world to so many other stories. And I think as long as you keep the tone of the original Willow, you could make it more complex and make it better.
And unfortunately, their attempts to capture the tone was to have a lot of kind of like unfunny one-liners that took you out of a moment.
It's dark, windy, probably the end of the world. I guess what I'm saying is, if either of you two want to make out right now, real quick, I'd be up for it.
Rather than in Willow, when the humor was inserted, it was part of the scene. It felt very.
Well, it was intentionally cheesy, and I think to make it gritty or about what trauma did they insert in this? Though I don't know what the premise is.
They made Willow sort of out to be that he just kind of ended up being a hack sorcerer. He never really did become strong or anything like that, and it was a deep embarrassment and shame. And he couldn't keep the Nelwyn and her family safe, and like his wife and son died at some point. And yeah, it's like, what's the point of this? Why would you do this to this character? What did Willow ever do to deserve all that?
The whole point of this was a character arc with Willow where he does become a sorcerer, and
And to add to that, though, there's also the major message in the film that you don't need to be a powerful sorcerer to be an important and valuable person. And so, even if they had decided, oh, he's never going to be a strong sorcerer, that wouldn't have bothered the character that Willow became in the movie. He
Right.
would have found other creative ways to do what he did, right? So, there's that. That was a major thing. It's like, why do we need to, assassinate all the characters that we liked in these old films? Why in the Star Wars sequels did Luke have to be this like sad hermit? Did Han and Leia have to have a child and then split up because they hated each other? And then
did Indiana Jones have to become a sad alcoholic?
Exactly. Yeah.
Why?
Yeah. Why do we have to make all of our beloved characters miserable in order to put them in a sequel? We can just have a wiser, older version of these characters. That's what we want.
That's actually outrageous.
Doesn't necessarily need to come from trauma. You can become a wise person without going through a dark and gritty backstory. Yeah. It's really bad. That show is not good.
Oh, it sounds like a mercy killing that they got rid of it.
Yeah, I don't, and the showrunner for that show is actually Jonathan Kasdan, who is Lawrence Kasdan's son. Lawrence Kasdan, who was a co-writer on Empire, Jedi, Raiders of the Lost Ark, and then Han Solo, and then The Force Awakens. But my point is, he was part of writing a lot of good stuff, and so his son is the showrunner for Willow. And again, like, they had the ingredients. They knew what people liked about the movie. They just had no idea how to put it together in something that work. So yeah, I don't know why you destroy Willow as a heroic character. I don't get that.
It's just not in keeping with the spirit of the film at all. Like, you have to make this. It is very intentionally 80s cheesy and saccharine, and that's what people like about it. And nobody wants a gritty Willow reboot. That's ridiculous.
And the thing is, the show wasn't really gritty. It tried to be funny and like quirky and all that kind of stuff, but that didn't jive with the weird things that they did to like Willow with the main character. I don't know. You haven't watched the show, so it's hard to have a discussion about it, but we had to touch on it, obviously, because we're talking about Willow. Yeah.
Don't watch it.
You can't unless you go and pirate the episode somewhere, and I certainly didn't have the ambition to go and do that, because I wouldn't download a car, obviously. But yeah, so we'll leave it there. The Willow show was bad.
Yeah.
It's been canceled. The showrunner claims it's on hiatus. I don't think you can bring that show back and save it. They said, oh, well, we decided to go on hiatus so the actors could pursue other acting opportunities. I'm like, really? You're in a show that's arguably one of the, biggest nerd intellectual properties, out there. That's what other, well, anyway.
Yeah.
Cover for the fact that it was canceled. Yeah.
That'll do it for Willow, I think. Next week, we'll have the final 3 episodes of this season of Strange New Worlds to discuss. And then we've got Ahsoka coming out the week after that.
Yeah. So I will give you my initial really quick impressions of Ahsoka. The trailers have me excited for a swashbuckling Jedi adventure. And, who knows if it's going to be good or not. Chances are it'll probably be bad, because that's just generally how everything new Star Wars is, unless it's Andor. Or the first season of The Mandalorian. But I have hopes, right? I think I've went back and watched some of the Clone Wars and Rebels stuff to sort of familiarize myself with the characters more, and I'm like, this will be cool. This could be cool. We'll get to see Thrawn in live action, the big bad from the extended universe and all that.
I read those books as a kid, so that is one thing that I am very excited about.
Yeah, and it's not going to be the same story, obviously, but but it is a neat character to bring into the universe officially.
The story of Thrawn is secondary to the character of Thrawn. Why you like Thrawn is because of what the character is. It's not because of the stories that happen in those books.
And Thrawn is played by not Mads Mikkelsen, otherwise known as Lars Mikkelsen. So there you go.
All the Mickelsons.
I wasn't sure about that. I saw the trailer and I'm like, why does Thrawn look like Mads Mikkelsen so much? I'm like, oh, it's because it's his actual real life brother playing it. But anyway, so I'm kind of excited about it, but I approach everything Star Wars now with a healthy dose of optimistic caution, where I just like being in that universe again, but I just don't like the things people are doing in it now. So
sounds like me in Star Trek. But yeah. I actually have been liking what they've been doing in Star Trek, at least at the end of the season of Strange New Worlds.
I can't wait to talk to you about that. I can't wait.
We'll talk about it next week. See you then, guys.